Hello learners, I am back again with a new topic on literature section, and today's topic is study of literary devices or poetic devices. So this is a common topic for every classes, whichever class you study. It's an important topic to know of if you study in class 9 or class 12, or if you are BA English student, or you are applying for MA English entrance examination for various universities in India. So these are the important questions which are asked in examinations. So that's why it's an important topic to discuss and know of for every students and every aspirants of literature. So let's discuss the poetic device. What does it mean? What is the definition of poetic device or literary device? It is also called figure of speech, is a part of figure of speech. So the broad category is figure of speech that includes other devices, including literary device or poetic devices. So whichever name it appears in your examination, you need to understand that it's talking about poetic device. Okay, suppose it comes a figure of speech, so you need to understand, okay, it's talking about poetic device or literary devices that you have studied of previously. Okay, so don't get afraid if the name is changed in your examination paper, question paper. So let's discuss what is the definition of poetic device. So poetic device is a technique, is nothing but a technique that a poet or writer employs to bring about a special effect in his writing work. Okay, it's a technique that he uses, that he employ in his writing work, in his artistic work, to bring about a special effect in his writing. So there are several poetic devices that a poet used to bring a special effect in his poetry or in his writing. So today I am going to discuss with you certain poetic devices that are very much important from point of view of your school level examinations, and for competitive students I will be discussing it on my further videos. And it is also important for competitive student to watch this video. If they don't know these devices, they will get to know the basic literary devices. Okay, so first poetic device is the alliteration. This is a very common poetic device which you have been studying in your school level poetry, whichever poetry you study in your school level. So you need to understand, I am giving here the references of the poem from different classes, class 9 to class 12th. Okay, so in each poetic devices. So alliteration is what is the repetition of consonant sound. When a consonant sound is repeated in a given line, so this is called alliteration. Suppose WH, WH, WH sound is being repeated in a certain line in your given poetry. So which poetic device is it? This is alliteration. Or or sh sound is repeated in your given line of the poetry, then this is alliteration. So let's take example like the grassy and wanted wear. So if you study the poetry in class 9, The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost, very important, very popular poem. So there is a line, grassy and wanted wear. So here were, that means W letter, that means were sound is being repeated. So here there is use of alliteration. So pick up the next line, stood still to smile through their hair. So stood still, smile through their hair. So this line has been picked up from the poem Photograph, which is prescribed in class 11 poetry. Okay, so here there is line, stood still to smile through their hair. So which sound is being repeated? It's sa. Stood still, smile. So class 11 learner should be careful while they are doing this poetry. So there is one poetic device here in this line, which is alliteration. Let's move to the next line, if we were not single-minded. So this poetry I have discussed in my previous video, and this line is picked up from the poem Keeping Quiet, which is prescribed in class 12 CBSE board. Okay, and I have discussed, so you can go to my previous video named Keeping Quiet and you can understand the explanation of the entire poetry. So if we were not single-minded, so wow sound is being repeated here in these lines. So I hope you have understood the alliteration and how to spot alliteration in the given poetic lines. And I have forgotten to discuss with you the one of the important impact the alliteration has on poetry. So it gives a musical quality to poetry. When suppose this sound is being repeated, if we were not single-minded, if we were not single-minded, so it gives a rhythm, musical tone, okay, to the poetry. So it's, how does it enhance the effect of poetry? It gives a musical rhythm, musical tone to the poetry and also enhances the poem's humor. That's it. Now let's further move to the next poetic device, which is anaphora. So anaphora is a poetic device in which a word or group of words is used repeatedly at the beginning of successive sentences to create a special effect or to emphasize something. So it is repetition of the same word but at the beginning of successive lines. At the beginning of successive lines, there is repetition of words but at the beginning of successive lines in the poetry. And another thing to remember is that it produces special effect. That means it is employed by the poet to produce a special effect or to emphasize something. When poet wants to emphasize something, okay, then he use anaphora in the poetry. Basically or usually it is in the form of imperative sentences. I hope you understand imperative sentences. Sentences in which there are commands or request order. These sentences constitute imperative sentence. So anaphora basically employ imperative sentences in the beginning of the successive lines of the poetry. Okay, you need to remember it because there are other poetic devices that I will discuss with you that will make you confused if you do not distinguish or if you not bear in mind the distinction. So distinction is that there is repetition of the same word in a poetic line but at the beginning, first thing at the beginning, so same line repeated in the successive line, as well as the sentence is of command, that means imperative sentence is there. Okay, so let's take one example from class 9 poetry. Poetry name is Wind. The lines are: don't break the shutters of the windows, don't scatter the papers, don't throw down the books on the shelf. So here what the poet is doing is urging. He is urging. So whenever there is urge in the sentence, it is called imperative sentence. So there is urge we find in the poet's statement that don't. The speaker is urging to the wind that don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So there is a repetition of the word don't in each successive lines and the kind of sentence is imperative. Okay, so that's why it's anaphora. Hope you have understood this. Next, move to repetition. So repetition is again another poetic device in which there is use of the same word in the poem, in the poetic line, but the words may be used in the same line anywhere in the line. Like in here we have found it being used in the beginning, but in repetition it may be used anywhere in the line. Okay, it is also employed to show the emphasis. Okay, so let's take example from two different poetry. So one is from Far Far from Gusty Waves, elementary school classroom of class 12, which I have already discussed in my previous video. You can watch that, an elementary school classroom. So the poetic device in this line is far far. from gusty waves. The far is repetition because the same word is being repeated in a line, okay, and the purpose of it is to emphasize. But here we don't find poet urging to someone, okay, so there is no imperative sentence, okay. So far from gusty waves, which poetic device is here? There is repetition. Another poetic line which I have picked up from a class 9th poem, which is A Legend of Northland. So the poetic line is by boring and boring and boring. So there is repetition, the word boring and boring and boring. So of course poet has employed this boring repeatedly to emphasize some idea that no, the creature here, the creature was a nightingale or some word that was indulged in the same, sorry, woodpecker was there which was indulged in some same monotonous work, okay. So here poet wants to show monotony through this repetition, okay. So now it should be clear to you the difference between repetition and anaphora. Let's move to the next poetic device. Transferred epithet. So epithet means adjective. Epithet means adjective. So adjective is transferred. We all know the meaning of word transfer. So adjective is transferred. So what is the purpose of adjective? Adjective qualifies a noun or pronoun. So here in transferred epithet, what happens? An adjective is used to describe some other noun. It doesn't use to describe the noun before which it comes, but it used to describe some other noun which is not mentioned here, okay. So let's move to the example like melancholy darkness. So melancholy darkness, I have picked this line from Rain on the Roof of class 9 poetry. So melancholy darkness. So melancholy means sad. So darkness is not sad here. Here darkness is a noun word and melancholy is adjective. So melancholy is used before darkness, but here is use of transferred epithet. That means the word melancholy is not describing darkness, but it's describing something else. And what that something else is? Human being. So something else is the human being who are sad in the darkness. So this darkness isn't melancholy, but the people who are living in this darkness are sad. Let's pick up another phrase from the same poetry, Rain on the Roof from class 9th book, dreamy fancies. So fancies are not dreamy here. Who are dreamy here? Human beings are dreamy here, who are lost in dream. The human beings who are lost in dream are dreamy, but human beings are not mentioned here. So here there is phrase dreamy fancies. So transferred epithet which is used here is what? That this word dreamy is qualifying something else which is not mentioned there, okay. So hope it is clear to you. So transferred epithet, I have cited 2 examples, and we will discuss the other poetic devices in my upcoming videos. So keep watching my videos and subscribe my channel if you have not subscribed for the further updates on literature and writing sections for all classes almost on an English topic. Until my next video, goodbye.